Welcome back to this channel. A short background. Right Media Group is a growth consultancy specializing in marketing agencies. With a background in agency work, the team helps agency owners build predictable client pipelines and scalable operations so the business can grow without depending entirely on referrals or the founder to hold everything together. Today, I am joined by Bruce Grower, founder of Cause, a branding and strategy agency that works exclusively with nonprofits and purpose-driven organizations. He spent 25 years building brands for Fortune 100 companies, then walked away to focus on social change. We are talking about how to build a positioning that actually matters, why most agencies fail in the nonprofit space, and one principle that changes everything. Bruce, welcome to the show. Please give a quick intro.
All right. Well, thank you so much. A pleasure to be with you. So sorry, I'm fighting a cold, so I might cough a little bit. But yeah, I'm Bruce. I founded Cause, I don't know how many years ago now, to work, like you said, exclusively with purpose-driven organizations. So we do some corporate stuff, but for the most part, we're working with nonprofits, for institutions. And I, just as you said, I had the good fortune to work with some great teams, some great people over the years, doing some very big projects. But my heart was really drawn into the purpose-driven work to see where I can apply these skills to help make a difference in the world and improve people's lives. So that's my very humble introduction.
You worked on a massive corporate brands for 25 years. Stanley, Liberty Mutual, is that correct? Yeah. And then you just left. What made you finally snap?
That's so funny. Well, I was working at a great agency in New York City called Suka Creative. Just a wonderful agency. I'd been there for years, wonderful group of people. And so that's where I worked with some of the big clients, but we increasingly took on nonprofits. We did a lot in the university and college space, a lot with high school kids who were disadvantaged by economics or race or health, all kinds of different things like that. So I grew up in India and in Israel and in the United States. And my parents were educators. So I grew up in an environment where we sought to improve people's lives in various volunteering kind of ways, occasional ways. So I think it was in my blood. My parents were both very committed to social change and positive change. So as my career unfolded and these opportunities kept coming to work with nonprofits, I think my heart was just naturally drawn there. So at some point I said, okay, I just can't continue working with regional finance or with Wall Street firms and some of these things. I said, all of us only have so many days in our lives. With the time I have left, I'm going to see if I can make a difference and just pursue this unique niche of working with nonprofits. So I don't know if there was one particular moment, but it just kind of evolved.
Was there a specific project or client that made you feel like empty maybe? Or did it hit you at all at once?
I don't think there was any particular thing. As you're asking the question, what's coming back to me was that, I branded a number of regional banks. I'd worked with some, very large, hedge funds, financial services company, very recognizable names, if I said any of them, like major international banks and finance firms or whatever. But we had taken on a string of regional banks. And at some point in there, I said, I just can't brand another regional financial institution because they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying, we treat you like family. We're personal. We give you better returns. Your money's safe with us, whatever. So at some point in there, I said, I just can't rebrand another finance institution. They're important. Everybody needs a bank. That's great. Banks can make the world a better, particularly like micro lending. We've seen a lot of really cool examples of what banks can do to improve people's lives. But for me, that was the sort of, I think, if you're looking for a single moment, that would be the straw that broke the camel's back, where I think I can't do another finance rebranding. And so shortly thereafter, I founded Cause. And so here I am.
So basically, you ran a marketing for nonprofit for 2 years. What was the biggest culture shock coming from a 500-person agency?
You mean to founding Cause? Like what was the difference or?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do when I was making Cause, I said, I want to have a senior level team. So people that have all been in the branding world or marketing communications. Everybody has to have at least 15 years of experience. Because when I was on the agency side, sometimes what I would see is that, we would take on these projects for some really wonderful, big, either companies or nonprofits. And then the senior people would all leave. They would hand the project off to the junior team. And so I didn't want Cause to follow that same model. I don't think it provides the best results. You need that mix of ages, of experiences, of backgrounds, because as you know, sometimes younger people have just more innovative ideas. They're fresher to the market. They're just full of ideas and passion. And it's fantastic, right? We can learn so much. But then you combine that with a senior level person who has the wisdom of experience. They've been around the block a few times. So if you put a team together like that, you can do great things. But at a lot of the big agencies that I saw, either that I worked at or, competitors or friends, whatever, there was this handoff to junior teams. And I said, I don't want to do that. I want to have a senior level group of people that we will never hand off to junior level teams so that our clients always have access to the wisdom of experience and the innovative creativity so that we can give them just top-notch insights, wisdom, as well as sort of innovation.
I mean, it's similar to, I'm not sure if you watch football, but even in football, if you have someone, more experienced in your team, you have an advantage. If you have a team full of youngsters, you don't have that wisdom in the game. What you should do in the last 5 minutes when you are up 1-0, how I can keep the game, right? It's exactly the same, because every team sport, marketing as well, is for me, it's like a team sport. You need that wisdom from the books, for example. That's why all the old books are just like gold, pretty much. From bigger marketing agencies. So yeah, I like this way of thinking in your business. Your
That's a
team
cool analogy.
your team got Emma Stone to record the anxiety video in 2016. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I had gone in-house at one of my clients, the Child Mind Institute, a wonderful nonprofit organization in New York City. So I was on the agency side and they were a client. And at some point in like 2014, they called and said, Bruce, we just lost our head of marketing communications. Would you consider applying for the job? So I'd been on the agency side for a long time. And as you know, being on the agency side, you finish a project like a big branding thing, you hand everything off to the client and you wish them luck. You're like, okay, great, go conquer the world, right? So it's sort of like raising a child, you send them off to college or something. You're like, okay, go get them, right?
Off you go.
So my curiosity was, well, what actually happens? How do you actually build a brand over time? How does marketing actually work? In a really nuts and bolts way, how do you build a social media following? How would you get more people to your website and then sustain that on your website, right? What does it take to get 1 million people to come to your website every month? Those are really hard things to do. Never mind for a company with a big advertising budget, but for nonprofits or a university, right? These are real nuts and bolts, everyday challenges. So I said, oh, this could be a really cool opportunity. I'll go here for a couple of years, then I'll come back to the agency world. I had this dream of starting my own agency, but I said, let me go inside of a really big, really excellent nonprofit working in children's mental health. And it's an issue I care about, and just see what I can learn about growing those things, actually building the brand over time. So that was my own personal challenge. And I was very clear with the Child Mind Institute leaders. I said, I don't have all the skills you're looking for. And I've been on the agency side for a long time, but I would love to learn about these things. So it was very congruent. They needed what I had, and I was curious about what they had. So it was a really cool partnership. So I was there for a couple of years. And during that time, we built a social media following from 14,000 followers to well over 100. Now it's over 1 million. They had 500,000 people already coming to the website, but they weren't regular. They had a lot of short visits and all that. We improved that to 1 million visits a month consistently. So it was fascinating to see what we could leverage, how we could do it. And one of the ways we did it was with celebrity or influencer related social media campaigns. So we built up to that. So Emma Stone came on right after I left, actually. So I can't say I ever talked with Emma Stone, but I had the good fortune to meet with Whoopi Goldberg and different news personalities in the United States, very well positioned, famous. And so their influence, I began to see, if you can get a celebrity who really cares about your issue, that can really draw attention to it and have a meaningful impact. But Emma Stone's video, so my successor there, a wonderful guy, he's the one that actually worked with Emma Stone and got her to the campaign. But that was the first time she had ever talked about her mental health and talked about having anxiety. And it just blew up. It brought huge attention, millions and millions of visitors
Yeah, I think it was
to
like
the
a
Child
billion
Mind.
views.
Yeah. Yeah. It was huge. I mean, it went viral because here you had a major movie star talking about what she would say to her younger self about her anxiety. So it was very personal, very meaningful.
Yeah,
But we had built up to that by making videos and learning about the power of video and how to bring together not only the technology, but the human heart. I think a lot of campaigns are, people have gotten better, but at that time, they focused more on the content that was like the what content. We do this, we do this, we do this. And so what I kept saying was, we have to make this emotional. You have to connect the head and the heart if you actually want to make a difference and
yeah,
actually capture people's attention.
exactly, exactly. I'm curious to get that amount of views, a million, a billion views, literally career-defining work, right? So I'm just, as I mentioned, I'm just curious in case this podcast gonna explode and gonna have millions of views. How many clients has Cause landed directly from that? If you can
Wow.
disclose.
Well, I mean, that was a really, okay. So Cause, we're a small boutique agency, but as we say, on another sports metaphor, we punch well above our weight. So, we've had the good fortune to work with just some incredible nonprofits, museums, cultural institutions, and we've never had to look for work. I can't tell you what a blessing it is. A lot of agencies spend a lot of money on advertising and so on. Our growth has been entirely word of mouth. So I think that work that I did at the Child Mind Institute was very influential, very meaningful to me, but I think it's helped us in our, just our networking. And ultimately, that's what this business is about. It's about networking. It's about word of mouth. It's about your reputation.
Yeah,
And if you don't have those things, you know, you can throw a lot of money at marketing yourself, trying to get new clients.
yeah. I mean, many agencies think viral equals to clients, but it's more complicated than that, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, that's a great point. Say more. What have you seen by way of how agencies are trying to do that? I mean, I
Yeah,
can speak about you, but just I'm curious what you think.
everyone is trying to create lots of short form videos. Everyone is trying to say something that it can potentially, blow up their business. But it's clearly more complicated than that. It's not enough if you go viral, but then how you handle the leads that comes through, from the video, how you handle the conversation. What's the back end if something blows up?
Yeah, 100%. And that point about the value of the actual work, I think that's where the rubber hits the road. So there's so many stories, and some of them are funny stories about, you have a new agency, everyone is starting to pay attention to them, and they land a big client, and then it blows up 2 years later, right? I mean, there's a funny story about an agency in one of the states in the United States that got hired by their state to make a recruiting video, like a tourism video for their state. And so they were the hip young agency, right? But they cheated on the video and they inserted um, a clip of video of a kid skateboarding outside. And it was very recognizable to people that knew that it was actually shot in Iceland. It was not in the United States. So people watched the video and then, started commenting on the video on social, like, why are you featuring Iceland and claiming it's the United States? So the whole thing completely blew up. It was a hugely embarrassing thing for the state it was a state called Rhode Island in the US. So it was hugely embarrassing for the state of Rhode Island. They fired the agency, right? So, and that was a buzzy agency. Everybody was like, oh, this is the cool, they're the upcoming. But then, and so there's 100 stories like that. There's a great one about Tropicana.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly my point. It's like people think viral equals clients, but how do you actually, handle all this volume and whatever comes from this? So yeah, I think you had a great point there. You can blow up one day, but you need to maintain that viral thing. You need to produce. You constantly need to be on, to look out for the trends and all these things. So yeah, great point there, Bruce. You said on the pre-podcast conversation with Yolanta, you said there are only 10 agencies in the US serving nonprofits seriously and you would only recommend three. Why is such a massive market so empty?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say there's probably more than 10, but there were 10 when I was speaking with her. There's, 10 that I could think of. And I think that you have to be willing to do a few things if you're going to focus in exclusively on nonprofits. One, you have to be willing to work for less money. Sometimes you have to take a higher risk because the nonprofit, they might have the budget right now, but nonprofit organizations, purpose-driven organizations, one of the things they have to do is maintain funding. So right now, for example, in the United States, the political climate is such that a lot of funding has dried up, right? So there's been changes in the government related to funding. There's been almost a persecution of anyone working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So funding there from corporate funders and some private funders has also dried up. So if you're working with nonprofits, all of a sudden budgets look really different. So how do you ride that wave? So you have to be willing to do that. Now, the same is true on the business side. Business budgets change all the time. So I don't know. Those are just a couple of wonders that I've had. If you're going to go into this and really be committed to working with nonprofits, you have to come up with different financial models than the big agencies sometimes have. So there's a great nonprofit, great agency in New York City called Big Duck. And I would say to any of your viewers, go check out Big Duck. They're based in New York. I got to know the owners years ago. We actually did some work together years ago, but they're a cool example because they figured out how to do this, that it was more, they had to do more than just the branding and marketing work. So the founder wrote a book. They started a podcast. They made it employee owned. So everyone had to buy in. So they have a really unique business model. For Cause, what we've done is we had to go to a really decentralized model. So we don't have an office. We have no overhead. We're a decentralized group of about 10 of us. So we had to really get creative. How are we going to make the finances work? So that maybe, this is really in the weeds. I'm so sorry. Probably very boring content, but when
Not at
you
all.
think about how people choose to do this, you have to really make a commitment to do this work. It becomes passion work more than, hugely profitable work in some cases.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that must be you must be so committed to this one because again, to work with nonprofits, you need to work with businesses that they might not be able to pay in the beginning, and yeah, that's a huge commitment. So yeah, understanding that nonprofit world and what are the potentials are there, strategies you're gonna come up with. Yeah, that's great. 20 plus years of relationship in New York City, Boston, LA, but that's not that I wouldn't say that's scalable. So how does new nonprofit find cause if they are not in your network?
I mean, through our website and social. So one of our current clients right now found us just through a Google search. So they're a wonderful organization. We're doing a anti-hate campaign with them. So I think they had heard of me or, something like that. But then they did a Google search. I came up as having an international background, having lived in Israel for a year. So, so they called and just said, look, we're seeking to do this work to fight anti-Semitism. We see you've lived in Israel, can you just talk a little bit about your current stance on this very complex subject? So we just had a really wonderful, very honest conversation about what is prejudice, right? Where does it come from? What's the current political discourse? All those sorts of things. So that's a little bit long way around. But, if it's not directly from my network, people find you on the internet, right?
Yeah, so you haven't tried running ads, LinkedIn, emails?
Yeah, I've tried a little bit, but again, we're a small decentralized agency, right? There's 10 of us. So we've been very blessed. I don't know what to say. We've had people find us or people will refer us. So we've gotten several nice large projects, very grateful from one client referring us on and just saying, oh, you're rebranding or you need a new website, whatever. You should really talk to Bruce over at Cause. So again, it's all that network.
You mentioned podcasting as lead generation tool for agencies, Big Duck, others. Have you considered doing the same for calls, or does that feel too marketing to you? Because the only reason why I'm saying is because honestly, your story, 25 years, purpose-driven, pivot, billion view campaigns. That's exactly the narrative that would, that nonprofits want to hear. I'm sure many people would be interested in this story.
Oh, you're so nice. That's so kind. So, I have another friend, Liz Reitman. This is another great agency in New York, called Right Design, or EITdesign.com. They're fantastic. She started a podcast several years ago. So I don't know. I'd have to ask her. But when I think about it, the love that I have is for doing the work. I love working with clients. I love solving complex challenges, helping them with their branding challenges, thinking about, here are the brand needs, here are the business needs, here are your audience needs. How do these things come together to create a really purposeful, meaningful brand that audiences will love and that will make impact in the world? So that's the work that I love, right? I love design. I love writing. I love words. I love people. How do people think? What inspires us? All that sort of stuff. So when I think about podcasts, to me, that feels like work. No offense to you. You're great at it. But for me, the thought of starting a podcast and then picking it up every week, who am I interviewing and, all that sort of stuff, and then marketing it, putting it out in the world. I don't know. It's just, that's not my great love. So I'm also trying to just be a responsible human. There's only so many hours in the day, and where do we spend it?
That's always the challenge, to be honest. When we speak to other agencies, other marketing agencies, they often find if they would want to start a podcast, oh, how much time do I have for that? So yeah, that's a great point. However, actually, in our agency, we do offer setting up a podcast, and the way we present it, we say we only need 180 minutes from you. That's our marketing strategy. Because basically we handle everything. That's why we say it's only 180 minutes. So basically, show up for the recording, and then yeah, everything else is handled by us.
Oh, that's funny.
AI is coming for design, copywriting, strategy work. How do you see it disrupting the nonprofit agency space in the next? I wanted to say 2 or 3 years, but the rate's growing. I would say in the next 1 or 2 years, probably.
Yeah, it's such a good question, man. And I don't think I'm an expert on AI, but what I can tell you is some lessons that I've learned. So the way that I use AI as a writer, as a brand strategist, is as a brainstorming tool. If I'm thinking of a new tagline or new positioning, whatever, I can give prompts into ChatGPT or whatever engine you want to use, and it'll give me back a bunch of really cool ideas. So that helps me in my brainstorming. It helps me refine things. Sometimes it'll open a new whole territory of ideas I can go explore. But when it comes to actually writing content, at this point, it's not sensitive enough or smart enough to have it really be meaningful. Now, if you're doing a general thing, like if you're trying to sell engagement rings, like, diamond rings or something like that, that's a simpler marketing challenge. And so AI might be able to do, write those ads for you, or, some of that sort of. But when you're working in children's mental health, for example, or if you're working with employment challenges within a region of the United States, that takes a different level of nuance and attention to the detail. And, you really have to go deeper into the research to get to the insights. And AI just isn't good enough yet. It's not able to do that. It may eventually. The other thing that I've seen with the AI, when I have asked it to do, could you write me 300 words on this particular subject for this particular thing, right? It'll spit it out. It's very fast, but it feels very general, and it feels very sort of not actually something I could use with a client. And I've had some writers on other projects that have used it, and I feel like I can always tell that it's not actually their authentic voice, that it's too general. It's not specific enough to feel real. On design side, I'll say that we've used it a few times when we couldn't find a photo. We'll just plug into AI. I need 3 people, 1 Black, 1 white, 1 Asian of these ages, and they're looking at a book together. And we want it on a city street, sitting on a bench on a city street. And within a few minutes, you can get to the photo that you need. So, and that some of them, with some work, can look very realistic. So that sometimes can be really helpful. But again, unless you're going for a specific AI illustrated kind of look, if you're looking for realism, it's not always there yet. So in my view, AI is a few years out. Like it's already being disruptive for certain kinds of things. But for
Yeah.
what I do at a deeper level with nonprofits where you actually have to do your research
Yeah.
for more complex tasks, it's just not there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. What are you seeing? Are you seeing
Yeah, I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing here because and exactly that's one of the reasons why we have the podcast, because we can keep these human conversations, right? Not just emailing back and forth. Might be AI generated, maybe an AI SDR speaking to you through emails or through chat. But podcast, it helps us to have that human touch and explore what's out there by actually learning what's in your case now in the nonprofit, business. And that's great because that's knowledge. And we want to know all the knowledge. What's especially if our niche is agency, you need to know everything if you want to be the best at in the market, right? So I think that's a great point there to brainstorm ideas. AI is great. Some image generation, I mean, it's improved a lot. Don't get me wrong, and we are following very closely AI, and we're trying to, of course, offload some of the work we do that takes time, for example, scheduling and all that for the podcast, for example. So yes, there are some great tools, but again, that human interaction, human connection, I don't think it's ever gonna disappear, regardless of what's the AI. Even if I'm gonna have a AI dog, I don't think it's gonna be the same as a real dog, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's funny.
There is a lot of impact washing now, companies slapping purpose on garbage products. How do you spot nonprofit that's actually doing good versus one that's just good at marketing?
What a great question. So when I was doing some of the work for the big companies, Liberty Mutual, Stanley, Black and Decker, Travelers Insurance, we had some very large accounts with these companies. And we did some of their internal communications, we did some brand work, various kinds of things for them. But this at that time was a really, really hot topic. They call it greenwashing at that time. Where companies all of a sudden are like, ooh, being environmentally conscious is cool. Let's say that we're doing, that we're cool with the environment. So it became a really sensitive topic. And I think it remains so today on the corporate side. You really have to be careful. After George Floyd was murdered here in the United States and the Black Lives Matter movement really picked up, all of a sudden everybody started talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now Donald Trump has come in and sort of hates all that. So now diversity, equity, inclusion, everyone's taking it out, right? So these winds of change, it just creates chaos for branding, for marketing, for communications. But I think, for in the nonprofit space, you have a little more leeway to be your authentic self and to, pursue the mission. Now, how do you tell the difference? For us, what we look at is track record. How long has this nonprofit been around? What did they actually do? For our direct client, if it's a SVP of some kind, the head of marketing or sometimes the executive director themselves, that we get to know how long have they been there. In the United States, you can look at their finances online. It's for nonprofits, it's all public. So you can go and look and see how is their fundraising, how, what's their financial state. So I think there's a lot of things you can do. You just have to do some detective work to try to figure out, and then also, having been in the business for long enough, having worked in Boston, New York, you get to know people. So sometimes I'll call a friend and just be like, hey, so-and-so just reached out. Do you know anything about them?
Yeah. Anyone who's watching, great wisdom there. Yeah, keep watching. Bruce, I'm gonna put you in a hot chair. I'm gonna ask 3 rapid questions.
Okay.
Most agencies claim to do strategic work. How many actually do in your experience?
Oh my
Like
Lord.
what percentage?
30, I would say. Yeah, 30. I mean, most of them, exactly to your point, they're doing tactical stuff. I get so many calls or conversations. We just want a new website. We just want a social campaign. And so our question is always like, about what? And where's the underlying meaning? Why would anybody care? And
Exactly.
that's where the deep
Great point.
strategy stuff comes in.
Great
Okay,
point
sorry.
there.
Keep going.
It's all right, no worries. If you could go back and tell 25-year-old Bruce one thing before launching Cause, what would it be? Something about lead gen, hiring, or positioning?
I would say you have to let go of your insecurity about being good at what you do. So for me, that was a big thing. I'm getting a little bit personal, but I think it's true of many of us. If you're ruled by your own insecurities that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, everyone else is smarter than you, you're never gonna be able to feel like you deserve to sit in the chair, So I'll yeah. So
Yeah, it's
I
it's
think,
it's mindset, right? Everything is basically mindset. If you keep telling for yourself, I'm never gonna achieve that, I'm never gonna make that with my business, then obviously that will not happen, because that's how you set your mindset, right? For failure. You set yourself up for failure pretty much. Everything starts from here, right? In the mindset, you need to imagine, what's gonna happen, then you plan it out and then you execute. That's the way of things, right? The last
yeah,
one, best piece of advice you could give to the world.
best piece of advice I could give to the world.
Yes, right now.
I would say best piece of advice I could give the world is recognize that the human race is one extended human family. The joy of one person impacts the joy of everybody. The suffering of one person impacts the suffering of everybody. We're interconnected. And to pretend that we're not interconnected on this small planet is not only irresponsible and untrue, but it's very dangerous. And so the world that we are inheriting and that my children and their children will inherit is becoming more and more dangerous because people refuse to accept the reality that we're one people sharing one planet.
This was powerful. This is a real conversation. Bruce, thanks for being real about the nonprofit space, the good, the broken, and the opportunity. If you are listening and you are running a purpose-driven brand, go check out Cause's website and their principles articles. And if you are an agency founder watching this, ask yourself, what's the one thing I'm giving away for free that's actually killing my margins? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. Subscribe for more conversation with agency founders who are actually building something meaningful. And Bruce, thanks again. This was a real one.
Awesome. Thanks. Great to be with you. Thank you